Your Honor, opposing counsel, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, may it please the court. They're telling the wrong story. The most important information that you have learned today came from Miss Ryder herself. Miss Ryder testified that she owed money to a Russian mob. You heard that despite her best efforts, her daughter was violently murdered by that mob. You heard that the prosecution would like to find Miss Ryder guilty of murdering her own daughter. And as this trial concludes, you have heard that the prosecution is telling the wrong story. Now I'd like to backtrack a bit and go over the definition of murder. It's a very easy bar to understand. No human being may knowingly take the life of another human being. That is the burden of proof the prosecution has to meet, and they must meet it beyond a reasonable doubt. Let me provide an example of reasonable doubt so that you can understand. Let's say that you put a cat and a mouse in an empty room. You shut the door for a bit, leave them in there, and open the door. You see that the mouse is gone. You could assume that the cat has eaten the mouse at that point, but say you find a hole in the wall, a hole leading outside. Well, now you have reasonable doubt that maybe the cat didn't eat the mouse and maybe the mouse escaped. That hole, that reasonable doubt, is what you are looking for in the prosecution's case. And should you find it at any point in their argument, it is your duty as the jury to find Miss Ryder not guilty of murdering your daughter. And as this trial concludes, it's become abundantly clear that there are many holes in the prosecution's case. There has been zero conclusive evidence showing that Miss Ryder murdered her daughter. And I'd like to go through that evidence just to show you how the prosecution has failed to meet their burden of proof. So we'll start with physical evidence. It's a very conclusive kind of evidence because a fingerprint or single blood sample can put a real murderer away for a lifetime. But as we've seen today, there is no conclusive physical medical evidence. The two medical experts, Dr. Quincy and Dr. Lopez, testified that they couldn't come to a single consensus on some of the most basic facts of this case. The time of death, was it 4 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 9 o'clock? There's no consensus. How did Parker sustain some of her more minor injuries? Or even, how did Parker exactly fall off that cliff? None of this has come to a consensus, showing that there is no physical evidence to show that Miss Ryder killed her daughter. And it must be admitted that a large reason for this lack of physical evidence is due to the incomplete investigation by the Midlands Police Department. The Midlands Police didn't take anyone's fingerprints. They didn't take their DNA evidence. Detective Chesney even testified they did not formally interrogate any other people on the Leckrone Loop for potential other suspects. It's for this reason, this incomplete investigation, that there is no conclusive physical evidence tying the crime to Jordan Ryder. And without physical evidence, we'd have to turn to witness testimony. But once again, you will see that there is no conclusive testimony showing that Miss Ryder murdered her daughter. You heard from Miss Kelly Dews that Jordan was playing around, teasing her daughter on the Leckrone Loop. What you didn't hear from Kelly Dews was that she saw Jordan push her daughter off the cliff. That's because nobody saw Jordan allegedly push her daughter off the cliff. The only conclusive testimony that we've gotten today was from Armani Rodriguez, who once again showed that the police investigation was not complete. The police didn't take Mr. Rodriguez's fingerprints. They didn't accept his DNA evidence. They didn't even check a registration book to see who was staying on the trail that day. So instead of having conclusive testimony showing that Miss Ryder murdered her daughter, all we can see from this testimony is that the police investigation was a snap decision to indict Miss Ryder. But ladies and gentlemen, let's not beat around the bush here. We know who murdered Parker Page. Miss Ryder saw the true killer with her own two eyes, because the fact was that she owed money to a Russian mob, and she wanted to pay it back legitimately, but the Russian mob came to her house and threatened her daughter's life. Miss Ryder did everything in her power to protect her daughter from dying, but despite her best efforts, Parker was viciously, brutally murdered by the Russian mob, who could still be out there to this day. She didn't comply with their demands until a gun was literally pointed at her head, and it should be our duty to find the true killers of Parker Page and make sure that they are brought to justice. But instead, the prosecution would like to find Miss Ryder guilty of murdering her daughter. They told you that a paper, a pole, and a push was enough evidence beyond a reasonable doubt to show that Miss Ryder committed the murder. A paper that was forcibly written by Miss Ryder's hand and told to be written down by this Russian mob. A pole that was taken by this Russian mob and used to show that they had killed Miss Ryder's daughter. And a push by the Russian mob pushing Parker Page off that cliff. This entire trial, the prosecution's case, the burden of proof has rested here. It has not shifted. It has not lessened. And it has not been met. Miss Ryder didn't kill her daughter. She loved Parker. She cherished her time with her. And the true reason that there is no physical evidence, the true reason that there's no conclusive testimony, the true reason that there are so many holes in the prosecution's case is because they're telling the wrong story.